Welcome, fellow EDST 630 friends. I'm Megan, and this is Itzel, Joe, and Justin, and we read the text Ambitious Science Teaching, which was written by Mark Witchell, Jessica Thompson, and Melissa Bratton, and was published in April of 2018. Ambitious Science Teaching is broken up into 4 core practices, which we'll be taking you through today. They are planning for engagement with big science ideas, eliciting students' ideas, supporting ongoing changes in student thinking, and drawing together evidence-based explanations. We think that the main themes are using big science ideas in the classroom and that learning is a collective endeavor. This can be seen in the quote on page 7, which states, "Students' hypotheses, experiences, cultural knowledge, and questions are treated as resources to help the class build towards big science ideas." Towards the end of this video, we'll be relating these themes of the text with other theories from the class. Let's get started.
Core practice number 1 is divided into 3 methods. These are identifying big ideas, selecting an anchoring event and essential question, sequencing learning activities that build specific understandings. Method 1, identifying big ideas. Start out with the whiteboard activity. In this activity, we start out by identifying the big ideas in both the curriculum and standards that relate to the topic the students will be studying. Write these down on a sticky note and place them across a whiteboard. Next, figure out how these ideas might be related to one another. Identify ideas with the power to explain. That is, do they meet these 3 criteria? Can this idea help explain a range of other ideas in the unit? Does this idea express relationships, not just facts? Is this idea written as a full sentence so we are clear with one another about what it entails? Method 2, selecting an anchoring event and essential question. Anchoring events are phenomena or things that happen, rather than topics or questions. Explanations for anchoring events require students to integrate a number of important science ideas together. Anchoring events are more compelling to students and more complex to explain if they are context-rich. That is, transforming a generic science idea into a context-rich story with details, including real people, places, and situations. Making anchoring events relatable to students increases students' motivation to learn and develop explanations using their background knowledge and everyday experiences. And by developing an essential question to accompany the anchoring event. This is not a yes or no question, but rather one that requires critical thinking. Method 3, sequencing learning activities that build specific understandings. Select and arrange learning activities that will help students wrestle with the big ideas of the unit. Start out by writing an explanation for the anchoring event, making sure to include all the necessary details and not leave out any links between cause and effects. This will help you identify the various activities, investigations, readings, and types of conversations that will make up the unit. Once the learning activities are selected, arrange them in a sequence that makes sense for students. Learning is a collective endeavor. Students reason better together. Here are some examples of talk moves you can use to facilitate the discussion of ideas in small groups or whole class conversations. Proving. Question or prompt that asks students to make public their observations, thinking, or past experiences. Opening up crosstalk. Use of peer-to-peer talk in which students talk to each other and not to the teacher. Revoicing. Listen to the student's statement, paraphrase, and rebroadcast to the whole class what was just said. Other talk moves include follow-ups, pressing, using wait time, focusing, and putting an idea on hold. Strong norms, predictable routines, and scaffolding enable talk to flourish. Establish norms that create an atmosphere of stability and safety early in the school year. These are co-constructed with students and cover 3 categories: respect for each other, equitable participation, and accountability to the science and classmates. Norms need modeling, enforcement, and check-ins with students. A form of this can be through the use of exit tickets to assess participation in talk and being heard. Create routines that encourage listening and purposeful talk. One idea is to have students think, pair, share. The teacher poses a question and the students think silently, pair with a peer to compare ideas, and share their thinking in a whole class conversation. Scaffolding means providing temporary forms of assistance for learners who are faced with instructional tasks that are just beyond their current capabilities. An example of this could be to provide students with sentence frames to support a structured talk.
The second core practice of ambitious science teaching is eliciting students' ideas. This core practice is about accessing a student's prior knowledge about a newly introduced subject. and a teacher should always launch a unit with this practice. All students have prior knowledge from the same class, from different classes, and outside the context of school in general. It's important to be able to get these ideas out into the open, and the authors identify two main reasons for why eliciting students' ideas is so important to science education. First, people of all ages will use any and all resources around them to try to make sense of novel stimuli around the world. Second, even the youngest of learners possess a wide range of existing conceptions, prior experiences, and information that they use to make sense of any and all ideas introduced in the classroom. The authors refer to this knowledge as different resources. And no matter if the resources are useful or problematic, right or wrong, if teachers don't find out what resources their students have, this can result in confusion or rejection of science. This core practice is made up of three different methods. The first being that eliciting students' ideas and activating prior knowledge. The second, helping students represent their thinking publicly. And third, adapting further instruction. For the first method, eliciting ideas and activating prior knowledge, this reveals the resources that students will use to make sense of the science in upcoming lessons. And this takes place at the beginning of a science unit and can take the form of group discussions around a big science idea, formative assessments, and so on. By activating prior knowledge around a big science idea, the teacher can understand where students are starting from and allows students to participate in sharing observations and building hypotheses, which leads us to the next method, helping students represent their thinking publicly. At this point, students have been able to express ideas and knowledge with one another, and now they're ready to record these ideas. This is largely done through building descriptive and explanatory models, which the book covers in later chapters. In order to really engage, these models should be explanatory rather than descriptive. In other words, the goal of a model is to represent a process or an event, and all of its observable and unobservable features. To ask a student instead to make a model of a thing or of an object would be about as useful as having them copy a picture from a textbook. It doesn't show their knowledge, reasoning, or their ability to engage with big science ideas. This is an authentic scientific practice that helps connect loosely related ideas, represent student thinking, and helps them to collaborate with one another. It also gives them a reference point as they progress through a unit. Moreover, this gives you, the teacher, a deeper understanding of where the students are at. Finally, the third method is adapting for further instruction. This is generally something that takes place at the end of the school day. Once you've built an understanding of where your students are at, it's extremely important to modify the rest of the unit to match the level of understanding that the students have. This doesn't mean that you have to scrap an entire lesson because it's too difficult. What it does mean, however, is that you should build on existing knowledge and experiences, address gaps in knowledge, and prioritize questions that interest students. Lessons that are adapted to students' existing ideas and knowledge are much more likely to directly influence how students think and learn.
Core Practice 3 focuses on supporting changes in students' thinking. This breaks down into three methods: introducing new ideas, engaging students in activity and sense-making, and collective thinking. The first method, introducing new ideas, explores things like deciding how much of the scientific idea you're going to present to your class, what type of interactive directive instruction you are going to use, and how you are going to present these ideas to your students. The next method, engaging students in activity and sense-making, explores what an activity is, how activities can be used in the classroom to encourage student growth, and how talk around these activities can be molded to be most successful. Sense-making talk is framing conversations in a way that engages the students and leads them to explore greater thinking. This includes helping students 1. Comprehend that there is a conceptual category and finding why something fits into that category. 2. Recognize distinctions among things that appear closely related. 3. Understand why things in the same class can be similar or distinct from one another. 4. Recognize how parts of representation symbolize something in the real world. 5. Recognize how individual parts make up a whole and that these parts have unique characteristics. 6. Grasp a new idea that can be used to explain an everyday event. And 7. Learn why a set of events or conditions causes something to happen. This method finishes by expressing the importance of small group discussion and supporting each student's individual insights and breakthroughs as they happen. The last method brings up the point that while small group discussion is extremely important, so is whole class discussion and exploring ideas through collective thinking. Collective thinking is the idea that a whole class discussion can be used for students to take their ideas and build off one another. In this section, it explains that group discussions can be broken down into 3 mini conversations to help students. These include: what happened during the activity? What do we think caused this? And how does this help us think about our overall question or puzzling phenomenon, or anchoring event? During this method, the authors remind us that it is always important to be mindful of the language that is used during these discussions and to have strategies for equity and full participation in the classroom. Making and justifying claims in science. The section that the authors added on making and justifying claims in science focuses on teaching students how to make and justify claims in a scientific community. It introduces students to scientific arguments, which includes developing claims, justifying these claims through scientific reasoning and citing evidence, and then molding these claims into a scientific argument. The authors understand that changing students' method of reasoning can be very difficult, and so they give scaffolds for supporting written and verbal arguments, as well as tips on encouraging students to comment on the arguments of their peers in a productive manner.
The fourth core practice is drawing together evidence-based explanations. This is a play on words because students will synthesize ideas from their learning experience and they will illustrate it on paper in their final model. There are 3 methods in this core practice: co-constructing a gotta have it checklist, pressing for gapless understanding in models, and assessing for understanding. In the first method, the teacher will co-construct a gotta have it checklist with the students. This supports metacognition by helping students reflect on what they know and how they know it. The teacher will moderate and elicit the public construction of the list by using EDST methods such as probing, follow-up questions, revoicing, and so on. The final list should not be long and include about 4 to 5 big ideas that explain the phenomenon they will draw. The next method is to press for gapless understanding in models. At the end of a unit, students will redraw the models with the knowledge they have learned over the course of the unit. While they are working, the teacher will move around the tables and give directive critique. They should offer more direction and more critique than they did earlier in the unit. This is not intended to make the models copies of each other. Students will naturally focus on different parts of the phenomenon, and the teacher should encourage that diversity. This step is crucial to student understanding. Method 2 should also be used in the middle of a unit. One option is to revise the original models. The authors recommend using sticky notes as students do not like to redraw or draw over their original models. The other option is to collectively revise the list of hypotheses. This will show how student understanding has shifted and what learning experiences shifted their understanding. The final method in this core practice is assessing for understanding. The goal for assessment should be to improve instruction and provide feedback to the students. EDST assessment abides by 5 principles. Number 1, assess what was taught. Number 2, use authentic assessment tasks that simulate actual intellectual work. Number 3, make the criteria for success clear. Number 4, use a combination of higher and lower cognitive demand questions. And number 5, provide equitable opportunities for students to show what they know. That concludes the 4th and final core practice. Another thing that EDST emphasizes is organizing with colleagues to improve teaching. They lay out steps for rapid small-scale tests of infrastructure change that result in improvement. The cohort should investigate which practices work best, under which conditions, and for whom. The cohort should take data at every step and analyze it in order to provide a more effective and equitable curriculum. The final question the authors ask is, can we be ambitious every day? Some of the aforementioned routines are labor-intensive and should be used several times a year. For example, developing evidence-based explanations for complex events. Some are best when used 1 or more times a unit, such as eliciting student ideas. Finally, there are tools in the book that should be used every day, such as scaffolding opportunities and giving students a chance to talk about ideas.
One theme ambitious science teaching addresses is that of curricula for social transformation. In Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Perry describes the concept of banking education as an act of depositing, in which the students are the depositories and the teacher is the depositor. The AST model contradicts this teacher-to-student relationship and mentions how this concept prevents students from participating in talk and sharing their opinions, thoughts, and ideas, all of which are valuable in learning how to effectively communicate, take a stand, and agree or disagree with others. The AST model encourages students to engage with one another in inquiry and for the teacher to not act as the authoritative knowledge, but instead be a facilitator in students' learning. And now Justin will explain another connection.
As I've mentioned before, one of the core themes in ambitious science teaching is that learning is a collective endeavor. If we build upon this, AST heavily emphasizes the importance of students building upon their pre-existing ideas and knowledge with one another, along with the knowledge that the teacher brings to the classroom. Like I mentioned before, it's important to get students to express this knowledge because, quote, even the youngest of learners possesses a wide range of existing conceptions, prior experiences, and information that they use to make sense of any and all ideas introduced in the classroom. In the book, the authors refer to these as different resources. Similarly, in the article that we read by Dr. Rosick and Dr. Clandinin, titled Curriculum and Teacher Development, they embrace the same idea when they talk about different curricular resources. They describe how a multitude of different curricular resources can contribute to the learning experiences. And these resources come from home life, cultural experiences, day-to-day experiences, what they learn in school, and more. If we engage with all the different resources in a classroom, this can contribute to the collective endeavor of learning. I pulled this quote from the article that I thought summed up the idea very well. Curriculum considered through these multiple lenses is revealed as an experiential process. It is made or co-constructed as teachers, learners, subject matter, and milieu interact in schools and classrooms.
This book is well written and organized in a clear manner for easy use and understanding. We think that this text could be helpful for future science teachers as a jumping off point to help engage students in a successful way. We think that this text could also be used by teachers that teach subjects other than science because many of the methods discussed throughout can easily be adapted to use in any other subject.
I believe that the ambitious science teaching curriculum is a great tool to teach critical thinking skills, scientific discourse skills, and peer collaboration skills. I agree with the book that learning and regurgitating facts is not the goal of science education. Understanding and applying the big ideas that explain complex phenomena is a much more worthwhile goal. Another advantage of AST is the longer that a teacher or school applies it, the more effective it should be. One focus of the book is constantly observing and analyzing data about what is and what is not working in a classroom and whom it is working for. The AST curriculum should be constantly evolving and improving. Another thing I thought that this curriculum does well is emphasizing equity through methods such as scaffolding opportunities. However, AST should not be one's entire curriculum. In order to have a well-balanced curriculum, one should also utilize methods such as project-based learning, social justice science, and citizen science.
Thanks for watching.
Bye!
Bye.
Bye.